Bummock Tennyson Research Centre is the second in an ongoing series of projects working with different archives. The first one was in the Lace Archive in Nottingham, and obviously 4 years ago we started in the Tennyson Research Centre. The kind of drive of the project is to go into archives and look for things that are not the tip. Bummock is the underneath of an iceberg, and we kind of see that as indicative of all of this content that is in archives and collections that is not normally seen, often hasn't been seen by anybody other than the people who work in there. So we're interested in finding that sort of material and flipping the Bummock into the tip, so to bring that out onto show through making artworks.
There's usually a wealth of hundreds or thousands of objects, documents and materials within archives that aren't necessarily known or seen by the general public. So our project, we're interested in working with what we call a controlled rummage methodology, where we go in and look for and ask about, well, what are those unseen, lesser known, maybe kind of yet to be discovered, or maybe perceived as less important. You know, often what is seen as the most important part or what is known can be a really subjective idea or view of that.
So rather than going into an archive with something that is known and using the catalogue to find materials in the archive, often through keywords and things like that, we are going in a very respectful way, but to rummage through and find things, maybe through materials, through smell, through asking questions such as, what has nobody else looked at in the archive, to the archivists themselves, in order to find this material that is unseen, uncatalogued, and of real, we think, important interest, but is not what is known normally.
I'm Jenny Gledall. I'm the Exhibitions and Interpretation Officer at the Collection Museum and Usher Gallery in Lincoln. The Collection Museum is Lincolnshire's fine art and archaeology museum, and we are part of Lincolnshire County Council's Culture Service. As part of this service, we work closely with colleagues at the Tennyson Research Centre, which is housed at Lincolnshire Archives, which is considered to be one of the world's most significant collections of Tennyson-related objects and archives in the world. This is a really exciting exhibition because it's opened up new elements of the Tennyson Research Centre that haven't been seen before, new stories related to the Tennyson family that haven't been heard before, and working with contemporary artists as a museum really offers us an opportunity to explore areas and narratives that we wouldn't necessarily be able to with traditional museum practice.
One of the things that really struck me was the name. It's the Tennyson Research Centre, it's not the Alfred Tennyson Research Centre. And so that led actually all of us to other members of the family. I started looking at Alfred's drawings, and then Grace Timmins, the archive holder at the time, pointed out these two little notebooks of Hallam Tennyson's, who was Alfred and Emily Tennyson's eldest son. And they were just wonderful. They're minute in size, they had a wide variety of different subjects and contents. They took me back to my own childhood and the things that I used to do. And there was no other thing that I was going to use once I'd seen those. Once I'd got these books in my head, it was kind of identifying what I was going to do with those. What could I tell a story myself that was more than they were themselves. I found this kind of way of making these wood block prints. I tried out all sorts of different things, but I got to these wood block prints that seemed to allow enough of the original to be there and enough difference to myself. Wood blocks were kind of synonymous with the time. The pre-Raphaelites, which are featured in the show, illustrated some of Tennyson's poems with woodblock prints, and it was also at this time of Industrial Revolution kind of coming in. So I like this link back. There's also a thing of time, of labour, that the time that it takes me to make these woodblock prints allows me to really spend time with Hallam's drawings, getting to know them. I was really struck by how much difference there was. There's chess problems, there's holiday visits, there's mathematical equations being worked out. It became like this encyclopedia of knowledge and a real insight into not just the Tennyson family or the Tennyson children, but the life of a Victorian child and equivalents to today.
My focus within this project has been on Lord Alfred Tennyson's great niece, Fryn Tennyson Jessie. Before settling on Fryn, I did take a good overview through the collection, looking at lots of different aspects, lots of different objects, things like handwriting, lines. There was a beautiful puzzle of a Tennyson home, letters, and various other objects. But in the end, it was hearing about and understanding about this great niece, Fryn Tennyson Jessie, who was just this amazing person that kind of drew me in. And I eventually went back to her. This project, so it's allowed me to be with and spend time with Fryn. And it felt like a process of getting to know her, of enjoying her company. And I did this through accessing the archive items, reading her books, and importantly, I suppose, going through her biography, which was written by her last secretary, Joanna Collenbrander. The research, it brought up some really interesting similarities between us, which was surprising. And there's just these small details that cross over between her own life and her family history and my own family history. The process of developing the work focused on intertwining narratives, intertwining biographies and portraits. So I thought a lot about the imagined and remembered narratives that come through the archive items of Fryn's life, as well as the similarities and crossovers between her life and my own. After an initial overview, I combed through all items that related to Fryn with particular attention on her photo albums and personal letters. The work from this project has taken a different approach to that of my normal practice, as in essence, it's developed through an ongoing dialogue and relationship with Fryn, approaching the work as a relationship with an individual through which a series of works is created to unfold stories and narratives. It's meant new processes and working methods have been developed, which are quite different to previous or my usual practice.
My first introduction to the Tennyson Research Centre was in the dome of the library in Lincoln, where it used to be stored, and Grace Timmins was there, and we started off by having a conversation about what objects in the archive might be the Bummock and which objects might be the tip, and we were interested in the Bummock items, and she led us to a storeroom where we were able to look through boxes very carefully with gloves on, look through boxes of a myriad of objects, a rich array of artefacts that related to both Tennyson and the wider family.
The items that preoccupied me were a mixture of both Bummock and tip. A single archival box relating to Edward, one of Alfred's younger brothers, who spent 57 years in a home for the insane in York, contained numerous vouchers and receipts for purchases made on Edward's behalf from gentlemen's outfitters in York, which inspired the making of a parcel covered in thorns entitled Touch Me. A sort of portrait of Edward is one of my 8 composite and layered drawings entitled Plant Seizures, based on researching plant remedies and derivatives used in the 19th century for treating the Tennyson men's various ailments and all the causes of their addictions. The protocols associated with archives, using foam supports for books and snake weights to keep pages open, became central materials in Bound, based on Tennyson's poem The Princess. In The Princess, according to Robert Martin, Tennyson attempts to deal with a thoroughly contemporary problem, that of the education of women in Victorian England. In the poem, Princess Ida initially rejects the prince to whom she was betrothed in childhood, as she has established a women-only college and wishes to pursue purely educational aims. Bound comprises 5 small fragments of speech voiced by the main characters, visible in separate copies of the poem lying between an overabundance of snake weights. Each book rests on a foam plinth to which are pinned the characters' names, all cut from excerpts of 19th century treatises advocating for women's higher education.
Participating in Bummock, the Tennyson Research Centre over 3 years enabled sustained research engagement with both materials and subject matter, with sufficient time for experimentation and some false starts. Negotiating the changing process for accessing the archives when they moved from the library to the Lincolnshire archives, including gaining permission to record the sounds of the rattle, provided useful parameters, while the residency periods working together with Andrew and Danica have been particularly beneficial in creating a critical space for ongoing dialogue and exchange in relation to our shared and individual responses to the archive.